know that pole fishing has come on in leaps and bounds over the last few years?
I did though, I switched on maggot, I had that roach on maggot and I went on the sweet corn. Just one grain of sweet, big tench, etc. But believe me, the days fishing on the float like this, your individual fishing, they have got to play a big and important part. So of course I'll be looking for those.
Hi there, my name's Mark Downs and today we're just outside Leicester at the famous Daiwa Making fishery. It's a typical man-made fishery and there are many hundreds of these springing up all over the country at the moment. They're superb for practising your fishing skills, simply because they're full to the gunnels with fish. This particular fishery, and there's 5 lakes in all, is full of carp, roach, tench. Billy Making, the owner, even tells me there's a few barbel. They're ideal for perfecting our skills, and today we're looking at advanced pole fishing. Like me, you'll know that pole fishing has come on in leaps and bounds over the last few years, and we'll be looking at some of the more sophisticated aspects of the sport that have emerged. Without further ado, let's have a look at our poles and then we can get off catching a few fish. As a match angler, I carry quite a few poles with me. In fact, with me today I've probably got in excess of 10 poles. But first of all, let's have a look at our long poles. I carry 2 types of long pole with me, both are completely different. The pole I use mainly, it's the Browning World Champion. It comes standard at 12 metres, but with extensions I can push it up to 14 metres in length. Now it's a fairly rigid pole, but it's very lightweight, enabling me to fish even the furthest canal banks, 13, 14 metres with ease. It's ideal for fish up to 3, 4, 5 ounces, but to be honest, for heavy duty work, carp up to 2 and 3 pound, then I'd use something far more robust. For fishing for 5 hours, this particular pole is ideal. As I just mentioned, for fishing for heavy duty fish, then I use a much more robust pole. Again, I use a Browning pole, but it's a spiral titanium. Now I've had these particular poles for 4 or 5 years. They're very hard wearing, they're very strong, they're very powerful. They're nowhere near as light as my Browning, but for heavy duty work they are superb. Guaranteed 100%, I haven't yet had a breakage. The problem with this pole is I only have it up to 12.5 metres. On many canal venues that I fish, I can't quite reach that far bank. But for today, both of these poles will come into use. Now this particular bag holds all my whips. Every time you go fishing to hand, more often than not you need a different whip. Now I think there's about 10 different types of whips in here. Oh, let's just cover them in ground bait. You can see how many pole sections that I carry with me. This is typical of a shorter whip. It's a Browning profile, 3 metres in length, totally telescopic. It's ideal for fishing close in. It's got a relatively soft action. Ideal for catching small fish, 2 and 3 ounces. No good for anything bigger. It's too stiff in the middle. Hook anything bigger, it'll crack you off straight away. Moving on from that, again a telescopic pole. This is a 6 metre telescopic pole. Again, telescopic throughout, feed it out. This is a full 6 metres in length. You'll notice from the action it's quite a bit softer. This is ideal for catching fish 3 and 4 ounces. Occasionally you can catch fish up to 10 and 12 ounces on this, but then you need to use elastic as a shock absorber. And I very rarely use elastic on whip fish, well, when whip fishing. A short pole that's typical nowadays is a semi-take apart, you just find it, semi-telescopic pole. These are ideal for close-in work, but occasionally if you hook a decent fish and it tends to run out, once again you can ship your sections on. This particular pole I use is a DAM telesnatcher. It's telescopic for the first 2 metres, which makes it ideal for fishing right down the edge for small fish. But should I want to move out a little bit further, it's just a matter pushing another section on, and there we go. Again, if I need to fish 3.5 metres to hand, push another section on, and we can keep going. This particular pole I do have half sections for, which makes it ideal if I want to fish 3 metres, 3.5 metres or 4 metres. It's a pole I've had for quite a few years now, and it's one I would never dream of getting rid of. I use it for a lot of my canal fishing. It won't be coming into play today. And what's more, it's a relatively cheap pole. You can purchase these for 40 or 50 pounds. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be basically long pole fishing today, and I'll be using predominantly my World Champion. It's a take apart pole. By take apart, we mean quite simply that the sections take apart. This is classed as a put over pole, where the thicker diameter section actually pushes into the thinner diameter section. It's ideal for breaking quickly and efficiently, and if you are playing big fish, you can put sections on quickly, and when it starts to come back towards you, you can take the sections off quickly. Right, baits I'll be using today, very simple. The good old maggot. Can't beat it. The Matchman's all-round bait. You'll notice in these particular maggots, they're nearly all bronze, but there are a few reds. Red maggots are gaining popularity all the time, and for some unknown reason they seem to be catching more and more fish. On these small fisheries, I don't know why, but they do tend to catch a lot of carp. Hopefully they'll provide a few good fish today. Casters, as we all know, before the maggot turns into a fly, it goes through the caster stage. I like introducing casters if I'm going to be using a little bit of ground bait. When we initially feed today, that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to put a fair amount of casters into the ground bait before we actually feed it. A few pinkies. You go to some of these fisheries, and I know the carp absolutely adore pinkies. There's one fishery down south that I know the anglers, they prefer to feed pinkies. Now I don't know if they're going to prefer it here, but I always bring a few pinkies with me just in case. Sometimes a double pinky as an alternative bait to a maggot or a caster can pay dividends. And of course, hemp seed. One of the cheapest baits you can purchase. A pint will cost you about 50 pence. It's a must for carp fishing. A good bed of hemp seed on the bottom, and without a shadow of a doubt, you'll have carp bubbling on it all day long. It's dead simple to boil. Simply buy it uncooked, drop it in the water for about cold water, boil it up, cook it for about 20-25 minutes, and then drain it, and it's ready to use. It sinks very quickly. It lies on the bottom. A good all-round bait. Yep, we're in again. There's a good shoal out there now. Oops, he's taking some elastic. Oh, didn't think it was that big at first, but all of a sudden he started to strip out on me. It's really going, this one. The thing about these blooming carp is that once they get the momentum, you just can't stop them. Even a small fish, once he gets his back tail going, he'll just take you and take you and take you. Again, you've got to be careful where you break it. It's a really, really good shoal out there now. Oops, he's taking some elastic. Oh, didn't think it was that big at first, but all of a sudden he started to strip out on me. It's really going, this one. The thing about these blooming carp is that once they get the momentum, you just can't stop them. Even a small fish, once he gets his back tail going, he'll just take you and take you and take you. Again, you've got to be careful where you break it. Must admit, the more fish you catch, the more confident you get in your fishing tackle. That's why it's ideal coming to waters like this. You can test your tackle to its limit. Look at that. 20 foot of elastic then. I bet you it's not going to be 10 ounce. Whoa, come on then. This way, this way, this way, this way, this way. That's it, it's coming in now. Here we go. Get away from my net. I never give in these, I can't believe it. Look at that. Jeez. I don't know what the life of this elastic is, but it's certainly taking some stretching today. Hear the wind whistling through it. That's it. Here he comes. Just come to the surface out there. Oh, it's not bad. Oh, hang on. It's a very pale coloured one. It's not a bad fish at all, this. Whoa, botch up with the left. It's him. Oh, I can see why it thought so much now. It's one of them famous ghost carp they've got in here. Let's just put this down and have a look at this one a bit more closely. Oh. These particular carp, if you can see it, whoops, are very pale. In actual fact, they're a cross between a koi and a mirror. And they're called ghosts because they're very white and they're very pale. And because they're a hybrid carp, they fight almost twice as good as a standard mirror or a standard common carp would. It's the same with roach bream hybrids. You find that when you catch a roach bream hybrid, it fights unbelievably. It must obviously get the fighting characteristics inherited from both species of its parents. A roach bream hybrid, you go to Ireland, you catch these roach bream hybrids, they're probably the best fighting fish you'll catch. Whereas you catch the roach, they don't fight greatly. You catch the bream, they don't, but the roach bream hybrid, they go all over the place. And I would imagine it's exactly the same with these ghost carp. Billy Makin, the owner, tells me the place he actually purchases them from, they grow an incredible 3.5 pounds in their first year. And that's some growth rate. Now the problems start. How do we get it in the net? Whoa, come on, come on. Come on. This is going to be a carp about 3 pounds, I would say. Not one of those little ones, because them little ones tear off. Tell you what. Coming up. Well, look at that. Great big tench. Woohoo! Whoa, no, he's not ready. Yes! Look at the state of that. My word. Got to be 4 pound plus, that. What a specie. What a gorgeous fish. Look at that. That is absolutely lovely, that is. Tremendous.
When I start fishing, you know, you never know what you're going to catch on. My favourite is 2 red maggots, just to see what's going. Two red maggots will always get you a bite from something. You never know what it's going to be, but because there are a few carp in here as well as bream. But remember, we're fishing on the bottom, we've balled some ground bait in. So 2 red maggots with an olivet so the bait gets down through the water, fishing on the bottom. And always remember where you've fed. You know, you've picked that far bank marker, where to feed, so you drop your float. It's very easy through the course of the day to actually move around without knowing it. So always get the float back in that far bank marker position. And that's just beyond where I've fed. But that's just beyond. I'm really hoping that the bream are going to come in from the outside, and the first thing they come across is my bait. I've fed those balls just a little bit, slightly inside that. As I say, they don't want to be exact anyway. You can't get everything on a. You don't want to, you know, you just want to feed an area where there's bream. This wind is really blowing today. Just pulling that float up a bit more. And then soon I'm going to start adding ground bait as well. Oh, the float shot off then, but that probably wasn't a bream. Bream usually take a little bit of time just to look at the bait. So I'm trying to get those 2 red maggots, and because of this wind and a little bit of movement, I'm fishing over depth. So once the bait is on the bottom, then it's fairly still. Just edge the float, get it set right, you know it's on the bottom, and then try to hold it as still as you can. There'll be some movement in the water today because there's a wind on it, and it's just drifting slightly with the wind. But all that feed has gone in, so I know there'll be some fish around somewhere. It's just a matter of a little bit of time that it takes for them to come in. You can see the presentation there is just about nice. It's just drifting slightly downwind, but that's okay. A little bit of movement is always good when you're fishing. And as usual with all this sort of fishing, normally you have a little bit of a slow start, but then it builds up. And once the fish start to arrive and compete for food, then it can get really good. And I'm straight into a small fish, but I suspect it's probably just a small roach or something like that. And it is. Just a small roach, only about 4 or 5 ounces, but this will happen at the start. You know, everything comes into the feed until the bream move in. Well, that didn't take long. My first bream. What I did though, I switched from maggot. I'd had that roach on maggot and I went on to sweet corn. Just 1 grain of sweet corn. I don't think it's a big fish, but it's what we're after. Probably is. This is what you call a skimmer. Sort of a bream around about £1 pound. They're still bream, but it's a nickname for a smallish bream. That took 1 single grain of sweet corn. Look at that, about £1 pound. And this is normal for bream fishing, this slime up the line. If you have a look at this fish, it's not a big fish, but just have a look. If you really have a look and see this slight indentation there in the head, that is a true bream. When it goes dead level, it could be a hybrid or a different fish, but that little indentation, the fins are black tipped, the body on these smaller fish is sort of silvery on the bottom and dark on the top. As they get older, it gets more bronzy. They just took a single grain of sweet corn. And they are very, very slimy. But that's a good start straight away on all that feed. That sweet corn really worked. There's all little shapes, different shapes of sweet corn, and I like to hook mine through the top end, that's the smooth end, and push the hook You wouldn't believe there's different ways of hooking sweet corn, would you? And push the hook right through and bring it out. If you have a look at that, I bring it out sort of underneath. Just bring it out underneath, so that when you strike, if you miss a bite, the chances are the sweet corn's going to stay on, but the hook is buried. Just the point's coming round to hook into the fish. Already had one on that sweet corn, I'm sure. And there seems to be a lot of fish there now. But of course, in this sort of lake, there is a real mixture of fish, so you never know really what you're going to catch. And even though I've fed all those initial balls, when there's somewhere where there's loads of fish, then you can top up the feed. So almost every cast, I'm going to think about throwing a ball of ground bait in. Here's the bite, and I'm in, and it's a bream. That's brilliant. I think it's the sweet corn that's done it. Sometimes, you know, when you come fishing, it's good to get a little bit of local knowledge. And I know they have been catching a lot of fish here on sweet corn, a lot of bream. You know, the bream seem to prefer it. This is a bigger fish than that last one, but do you see how quick it took? You can also see where it's blown the sweet corn up the line and just lip hooked the bream. Oh, that's a beautiful fish. A little bit larger, they're gradually getting bigger as they move on to the feed. And that's a much better fish. There. Have a look at that. It's a beautiful fish. See those black tinge fins? The sweet corn blown up the line. Just a gorgeous fish, probably about 1.5 pounds that one, but straight into that sweet corn. This is a commercial fishery and they do put corn, they put maggots, they put everything in, but bream do love sweet corn, particularly in the summer months. Perfectly lip hooked, 1.5 pound bream, lovely. That swim's really alive out there now. I must show you my new hook length knot. I learned it last year, can you believe that? I'm still learning. And you lay your hook length line and your main line together. There they are lying together. Just wet them. Just use my fingers just to wet them. Any knot you tie you should wet. So there's the two pieces together. If you form a loop like that, can you see that loop? And then just give your finger a twist and that will twist the line. You need to hold that twist then to make sure it doesn't come undone. But you're left with a loop of a little bit of twisted line. Put your hook length back through there, and there's a little tag of your main line as well that you can put back through there as well. And the clue as to whether you've done it right, have a look at that, and can you see how it looks like a figure of 8? That's what you must get, that figure of 8, and that's where you get your strength from, the figure of 8 knot. And just pull them together. I've already wetted them, and you get an incredibly strong, and please don't ask me the name of it, I don't know the name, but that is an incredibly strong knot. Just trim it off. Just trim it off closely to the knot. You can't hardly see it, but it's incredibly strong and you get perfect presentation. Now the rig I'm using today is a sort of a medium heavy rig. It's not overly heavy, I'm fishing for bream, but there are a few carp here, so I've had to consider that. And the hook is a 16 Camasan B911. It's a barbless hook. You have to use barbless hooks on all these sort of fisheries. And then I'll just hook that on the end of the pole. I've then got a hook length about 12 inches of 3 pound breaking strain line. That's 0.14 millimetre. Can you just see the knot there? I've just got a knot there with a number 10 shot above it, just above the hook length. Another 5 inches, 4 or 5 inches above that, I've got another number 10 shot. And then above there, I've got a number 10. I've also got a small shot there. That's just one that I needed to balance up the float, but it's not really doing any practical work. The main line is 0.16, which is about 4 or 5 pound breaking strain, so it's plenty strong enough. And then I've got a brass Olivet. It's a Drennan inline Olivet, and I've plugged it so I can move it up and down. That little shot is just, once again, just to balance the rig. It's not doing anything. And then we've got this all the way up to the float there, which is a 1.5 gram Browning Nevis float. It's got a carbon stem. I like to use carbon, much better balance. It doesn't twist over. Balsa body, and then a fibre bristle. A fibre bristle that really shows up in the light, but well, I've got white water out there, so can you see where I've blackened that top? I've just used a black marker pen, a waterproof marker, to blacken that top, and on white water it's much better for seeing, but a little bit of orange there to show me lift bites. And up to the elastic, and this is a number 12. It's a Browning high vis, but it's fairly softly set. Once again, I know there's 1 or 2 carp here. I can't fish too light. It's just fairly softly set, and then just attached to the connector there. So, and that elastic's through 3 sections. A number 12 elastic through 3 sections, which should cope with everything we've got today, and it has so far quite easily. Just cast out again and straight away into another fish, but it took it on the drop. So I think there is an odd carp in here, as I said earlier, and I think it's possibly, that may not be, it might be a big bream, but I'm guessing it's a carp. Seeing by how much elastic it's got out of there. But this will happen. I mean, if I can get, it took it on the drop, this fish. If I can get to the bottom, then I think I'm going to get bream every time. But the thing is, what you've got to think about, we're fishing for bream, but I've balled it in, and now it's a fish every cast. As soon as it gets out there with that single grain of sweet corn, it's a fish. This is, oh, this is just a small, lovely little common though, beautiful. Nice in between the bream I'm catching. They do whiz around though, but I just caught a glimpse of it, and I think pretty sure it's a small carp. But in a water like this, where there are lots of fish, takes some getting in, because I've got bream elastic in. I haven't really got carp elastic, which, you know, is a bit softer. It's a lovely, beautiful common. Look at that. Probably about, lovely. I don't mind catching other fish. Yeah, lovely common carp. Look at that. That took that sweet corn where I've balled in. Of course, there are carp here, and it's just coming and taking it on the drop. They're nice in between bream, aren't they? I love them.
This is a beautiful lake, right by the side of the motorway. It's called Broadlands Lake. It's absolutely stuffed with roach up to 2 pounds, bream up to 8 pounds, carp up to over 30 pounds. Oh, I'm having a bite of chuck. Fishing up in the water, putting a lot of bait in. Every time I cast out, a pouch full of bait. And those fish are just about 5 foot down, coming up after the single maggot. Absolutely fantastic fishing, and one that I really enjoy doing, because nowadays it's so easy to get into the trend of sitting on a bed chair all the time and waiting for those big carp, big tench, etc. But believe me, a day's fishing on the float like this, you feel like you've fished, you've worked at your fishing. It's real good fun, and some big fish can be had using this method. I've caught 5 pound orf, 2 pound roach, 5 pound chub, all sorts of fish out of still waters like this, doing this exact method. Yep. I've had fish up to around about 1 pound so far. I'm trying to hopefully feed these smaller fish out. But having said that, not all roach begin at 2 pounds. And although I suppose I'm known as a big fish angler in the angling press, I've spent many, many, many days fishing for fish that size and enjoyed it all day long. And I don't mean just catching them for live bait. I've actually spent time out to catch fish like this. For a start, you're improving your angling techniques, you're working, you're not being idle. And the day that I stop enjoying the float going under, well, that'll be the day I pack up fishing. Can't see that happening. Let's talk a little about the method. What I did when I came, straight away, I was shooting maggots out into the swim. I always find it strange that people wait till they've tattled up to start spraying out into the swim. If I'm going to fish this method, and I know there's roach out there, you know, a lake like this that's full of roach, then if it takes me 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, 20 minutes to tattle up, then every couple of minutes I just keep spraying bait out there, because then you've got a 20-minute start. You know, why tattle up, get everything set up, and then start spraying bait? Typical today, I've sort of started, and as soon as I've cast out, I'm into fish. I can see fish rising in the swim before I even start fishing. That's perfect. And the added advantage, and I've mentioned it many times on my videos and articles before, that there's nothing better than feeding fish without actually hooking any. You're getting them confident before you even start. And that's what's typical that's happened today. I've been feeding for about 20 minutes while I've been setting my gear up, cast out, and away you go. I'm using a 13-foot fine action 13-foot float rod. It's actually a Silstar Match Team rod. It's a beautiful rod. There's a lot of rods like this on the market. I'm not just saying that this is the only rod, it's the one I use. I like it because I can use lines like today. I'm using 2.6 main line and I'm using a 1.7 bottom. I don't want to come any lower. A lot of people will say that you can actually come down and land anything on 1 3/4 pound bottom. To be perfectly honest, although I'm hooking and sort of landing small roach at the moment, that one's a little bit better, that's a nice fish, then I want to be in a situation that if I do hook a 2 or a 3 pound roach, then it could be that next bite and I want to be able to land them. Another beautiful roach, look at this. Another reason the pike fishing's so good here as well is that they've got so many roach of that size to eat. You know, no wonder there's a lot of 20 and 30 pound pike in this water, and big eels as well eating those. The reel I'm using is actually not available now on the market, but there is a few close face reels like this available. This is an old DAM. People used to call it the coffee grinder because of the, oof, just pulled out of a decent fish. They used to call it the coffee grinder because the shape of it. I like it because for this type of fishing, when I'm going to be casting a lot, then all I have to do is push the button and I can cast. See, push the button and cast. I've got no bail arms, etc. They're not as good as for range fishing as an open bail arm, but I'm only sort of casting a fixed spool. I'm only casting sort of, what, 3 rod lengths out, 4 rod lengths out. It's perfect for this kind of fishing. It is basically a match type reel, but this is match type fishing that I'm doing now. I am fishing for big fish, but I'm basically set up like a match angler. And why shouldn't I be? Because you don't need to be a specimen hunter to be able to catch small fish like this, or a match angler to catch big fish. Do both. I actually get rigged up like this because this is the best way to fish this method. I've got an apron, I've got my bait in the apron, I've got all my hooked and nylons, my disgorgers, everything here. I've got my keep net here with a special indentation there for the rod, fits on there. Catapult, bait, brilliant. It's a match type setup, but it is the only way to fish this type of fishing. If you were just sitting here with a bait bucket, then you know it's so awkward. You're bending down, you know, you get tired quickly. This is dead enjoyable fishing. You're just spraying the bait out. There we go, just down. Yes, and another one. Another roach. Everyone a roach. Let's just look at the setup. I've got a straight waggler. There's the waggler. Locked with 2 large shots, obviously depending on the weight. This one I think is sort of a 3 AA. So I've locked it with the AA, bulked it all up there. I've come down, I've put a dropper shot there. I wanted to go through the water fairly fast to get through the very, very tiny fish. And even now I'm still catching quite a few small fish. I've then got farther down, I've got a number 8 down there just to give me some indication on the float. And then I've got a size 18 hook to 1/7 bottom. That's 2/6 main line with a 1/7 bottom. And that's basically it. A lot of people try to make a lot out of it, how to shot the float and what type of float to use, etc. I think the main and important thing to remember about this type of fishing is if you've got the right setup and you're not feeding, you won't do so good as, believe me, a guy that's got a half right setup that's just feeding all the time. It's a matter of getting them almost suicidal. I've spoken about this before in fishing. If you can get to that stage where the fish are just coming up, taking all the time, taking everything they've just forgot, they're not frying it all, they're just coming up off the bottom, grabbing it, down goes the float, and away you go. That's the situation I've got these roaching at the moment, and every time out there I'm catching. Just one other thing about the float. If you notice, I'm using an insert float, which means that there, I can change the colours. If you just look, sometimes the light will change and I can actually change the colour of the insert. That's the only reason I'm using that rather than a sort of a flat-topped waggler. That's the reason I'm using that. So if the light conditions change and I can't see the float, in fact I've changed it. I started on a yellow float and realised I'd dropped a boob and then put the red on. In fact, I may, if this light keeps going like it is, change to a black one. Sometimes in light water where it looks almost white, a black tip is even better than the red. I'm using a single white maggot as bait. There you go, on a size 18. That's just falling through the water with the rest of the loose feed I'm putting out there. Out we go again. And maggots. Let's talk about the cast and what we need to do after the cast, because there's 2 important things. A lot of people tend to actually cast the rod really hard and cast it at the water. There's nothing worse than that. You get tangles and you actually make the waggler dive into the water and scare the fish. What you need to do is cast it high, cast it right up into the sky, like so, and then feather it down. Now, when I say feather it down, as it's going out there, just put your hand on the line. I'll show you how to do this. If you just come in on the reel, I'll show you how to do this. I'll come down there. Look, I'm feathering, and then I put my hand onto the line before the float has gone as far as it can. What that will do is feather the line down and bring the float down nice without a bang onto the water. It don't go straight into the water, it just comes down nicely onto the water. The softer it lands, the better. Obviously, you're not scaring the fish. And the other thing is to dive your rod tip into the water as soon as you've cast. Let's do that again. So it's got to go fairly high, feather it down like so, rod tip into the water, about 3 or 4 winds, so you've sunk the line, maggots around the float like so, back up and in. That's how easy it is. That's simple. Beautiful bag of roach. Over 20 pound of fish there. Fabulous. Look at those. Quality roach fishing. Absolute quality. Absolute quality. Let's put them back. Look at these for conditioned roach. Beautiful condition. Absolutely beautiful conditioned roach. Look at that. Oh, oh, absolutely beautiful. Oh. Bags of life. Look at that. Beautiful fish. Absolutely cracker. Let's put them all back. Notice I'm not rolling them down the net. I'm just lifting the net up and letting these fish out. Away you go, folks. Back to fight another day. Another beautiful roach, look. Just a couple of perch in there as well. Caught a lot of roach today. Come on, folks, out you go. Oh, look at that. Beautiful.
If you were to ask me what I like about fishing, there's quite a few things. I enjoy the environment, enjoy the fresh air, enjoy catching fish. I think there's something good about having a challenge of something that I can't see in that water and trying to catch it. I think that's a terrific challenge. More importantly, me as a person, I'm very competitive. I like to win. And one of the things I like to do, whether it's team fishing, individual fishing, I like to win. I don't like coming second. If you were to ask me if I were coming second in every match I could ever fish, I'd probably pack in, because I enjoy the competitiveness of winning. So if in a team competition, I expect to win. If individually, I expect to win every time I go fishing. I don't, of course, I don't always win, but I always think that when you're going fishing, you must think positively about winning a competition, whether it's a team or individual. I'm sat on the New Junction Canal. Around Doncaster, we've got a tremendous amount of canal systems, up to 30 miles, and within 10 or 15 minutes I can be on any of them sections. We have a tremendous amount of matches on them, some team, some individual. So I fish a series of both. But both team and individual are different styles of fishing. Team fishing, I might be fishing chopworm, I might be fishing squat most of the time. I might be trying to catch an eel on the long pole. Individual fishing, I do none of those, because I don't think you can win by squat fishing and chopworm fishing. I think it's got to be a positive approach. And I always do it on a different type of challenge. I will fish the pole, but I'll generally be fishing big maggot or castor and hemp. And also in this canal, apart from the amount of roach and perch we've got on them lines, we've got a tremendous head of skimmers, tremendous head of chub. And when you're individual fishing, they have got to play a big and important part. So of course I'll be looking for those. And that varies on different parts of the canal. If I'm on the Keeby end of the canal, the far bank line, we'll be fishing for bream. I'll be attacking it for bream. There's an occasional area where you might catch a chub or two, but generally I'll be fishing for bream. On the New Junction Canal, it's nearly always chub. There's only one part of the New Junction where they catch a few bream, and that's in the lower numbers. And the rest of the canal, on the far bank, it'll be tied up for chub. So when I'm fishing a competition, I'll generally be fishing them species to start with and building a pole line up, whether it's with hemp and castor or big maggot. That will vary on the different types of areas that I'm going to fish, but more importantly, I will be fishing to win that competition. And today I've drawn a peg that's a good peg, and I've got a good chance today of winning the competitions. So I don't want it to waste it, I want to try and win the match. So let's get stuck in. What I'll show you now is the techniques that I'm going to adopt and the way I'm going to fish to win a competition. So let's get on with it and try and win the match. The first thing we do when we get to this peg is mix as ground bait. And that depends on which part of the canal system I'm going to. If I'm on the Keeby end of the canal, I'll be mixing two, which will be a bream ground bait and a roach ground bait. If I'm on the New Junction Canal, from the low numbers, again, I'll probably mix a bream ground bait. But the rest of it, I'll just be mixing one ground bait, which will be a roach type ground bait. Even when we're fishing a match to win, and on a positive way, I still want a bombardment of ground bait on my pole line. On this canal, roach respond to ground bait, provided you've got the right mix, and I'm going to show you what the correct mix is in a minute. So it's important that when you put your ground bait in, it's important that you put the right one in so that the roach do respond and come onto it. If you don't put ground bait in, you just lose feed. Over the last couple of years, that's not worked as well as the ground bait. And what happens is the fish then will go to the angler's near that have put the ground bait in. So even if the fish don't come onto the ground bait, you can fish a little bit further out away from it. At least you're giving your option of doing both. So if I'm going to mix a roach ground bait, the one I use at the moment, which is very popular and works very, very well, is this. 25% is Super Cup. Everything on this canal, whether it's roach or bream, is based around Super Cup. It is the best ground bait on the canal. 25% of the mix is that. 25% is Super Match. That's a very nice roach ground bait. It's got hemps in. It's a darkish coloured mix. The canal is quite clear at a lot of times, and I think you want a bit darker mix, and that helps it go a bit darker. The two other types that we put in the mix is one is brown breadcrumb, just gives it a bit more air, it gives a bit more oils, and it actually makes it work in the peg a little bit better. But the one that will surprise a few people is damp lean. We actually put damp lean into the mix, and what that does, it makes it hold on the bottom. Because the canal tows quite a lot one way and then it'll go still again, then it'll tow and go the other way, we need something with some body in it that'll hold on the bottom, and that's what lean does. So each of them four, we put 25% of each into a mix. When you've put the four in, just mix it together like so in a round bowl. Always use a round bowl, not a square one. Just mix it round like so. So you get a nice texture and get it all mixed in nicely. Now because this ground bait, you don't need to add a lot of water, you'd be surprised. Because if you put too much water in it, becomes very stodgy. So what you want to do is just keep adding a little bit of water at a time, just a little bit like so, and then turn it round. Because if you make it too stodgy, you defeat the object of all the oils and everything working in the ground bait. You want a fairly dry mix that will bind and hold together. So just mix it gently, and then when you think you've got it all nicely separated, just one squeeze to see if it holds. That don't quite hold enough at the moment. So what I do is just add a little bit more water, not a lot, just a little bit like so, and just keep doing it gradual. Don't chuck a load in at start and spoil it before you get finished. So all we're going to do is do that. Just keep stirring it round and round and give it a thorough mix like so. Just one squeeze, and then when it holds nicely like so, and then crumbles gently, that's about perfect. Now what you might find is you might, just before you start fishing, because you do this the first thing when you get to bank, is you might just have to add a little bit more water, but you can just squeeze it like so to make sure that it holds. When that hits the bottom, it will just spread out gently. And that's a nice mix that works pretty well at the moment. But that's a roach mix. I wouldn't even dream of putting that in for bream. I don't think I would catch a bream on that particular mix. And what I would do when I was bream fishing, I'd use a mixture of brown breadcrumbs and Super Cup, and I'd use 2 to 1, 2 brown crumb, 1 Super Cup, and I think that is a good mix for this canal for bream fishing, but not for roach, but for bream. So what I would do, I'd put 2 pints of brown crumb in and 1 Super Cup. There you go. Mix it round together like so. Now this, because of the brown breadcrumb, it will absorb a little bit more water. But again, you don't want to put too much as you're going to make it absolute stodge, because if that happens, it just defeats again the object. You stir it round, like so. Now that needs to be just fractionally wetter than your roach ground bait. But again, that's all nice and fluffy, and that will just hold together beautiful. And that's perfect, that will work very, very nice. That can be a little bit softer because it's going in a feeder. We won't be throwing this in, so it can be a bit more fluffy and a bit softer. Them 2 ground baits on this canal, you won't go far wrong. You've got a nice roach ground bait and you've got a nice bream ground bait, and I can guarantee that them species of fish will come onto them ground baits. I fish for bream and chub at the start, so it's important that I get the setups absolutely right, and they can be different on the different parts of the canal that I'm going to be fishing. If I'm on the Kiwi section, or I'm on the lower numbers on the New Junction when I'm fishing for bream, then it's a little bit different to the chub sections. That's on the terminal tattle. On the main tattle, like the rod is 11'6", soft to medium action. It's the same rod for both occasions. And I find that you don't want a rod too strong, because what you find out, if you use a strong rod, you have to use strong lines, and that means you have to use thicker hooks. That means you don't get as many bites and as many fish. You've got to give yourself a chance of getting a bite and then landing the fish. The reel, I like a twist buster reel for the simple reason it takes all the twists and the turns out of the hook length, and you get no ravels on your top ring of your feeder rod, which I think is quite important. I use a 3 pound main line, which I think is about right. Some people use 4, I think 3 pound is about right. Then down to the nitty-gritty end of the action. If I'm fishing for bream, what I find out is I use an open-ended feeder. But I do just change it a little bit from normal ways. I use a medium feeder. It's got a little bit of weight in it, a bit more than normal, because I find that with the canal towing one way, then towing the other way, I find that you need to hold the bottom when it's towing. If you have too little lead on, what happens is your tip keeps dropping back, and you find out you keep striking, you're thinking that the bite's and it's the actual tow that's doing it. You need something that'll just go in and just hold even when it's towing. I do modify it a little bit by putting a bit of power gum in between the swivel and the feeder. I find that that's quite important. It just takes a little bit of shock, and I just think it works pretty nice. Now the hook length is, for bream fishing, is an 0.10. I always fix it to my main line by a loop to loop. I find that is the best knot. A lot of people use half a blood knot onto a loop. Now if you do that, stop doing it, it's very instant, and go to loop because it is a stronger knot. And if you use half a blood knot onto a loop, you'll be surprised how weak that knot actually is. 2.5 foot hook length to a size 22 Team England maggot hook. I find that is a nice hook for bream fishing. It's not a strong hook, but it's not a weak hook, it's an in-between one, and it works pretty well. I wouldn't dream of using that for chub fishing, but for bream fishing, that is a nice hook. And that's a basic setup. 6-inch link to the feeder and a 2.5 foot hook length to the hook. And I find that is a nice setup for fishing for bream. Now first thing you do when you hook into a fish, determine what you think it might be. If it's a chub, you'll know straight away because we're trying to get it roots and it is. But this is not a chub. This is either a perch or a skimmer. When it moves into the middle of the canal, pull it out. Feels like one of them nice perch. It feels a good fish. You don't want to be too aggressive with it. Just be a bit careful. It comes to the top. It's doing some fighting. Oh, look at that for a perch. It's a cracker, that one. Hey, oh, where's my net? There we go, my beauty. Hey, hey. Now, you're not really bothered about catching many chub when you're catching perch that big. That's 12 ounce, that one. That's a nice fish. Now, that's a bonny fish, that. That's 10 or 12 ounce. That's a lovely fish. That's a nice start. There we go. There's not as many chub nowadays as there used to be. Ooh, that's right outside it reads that. I reckon that will go straight around. So, if you catch a chub, you've got something to build on, because they're quite good fish nowadays. You know, they're like 2 to 3 pound, the big fish, but not everybody gets one. And there's not as many caught nowadays as there used to be. And a little indication again, drop back, and another fish. Now they've really moved on to the feeder line now. Now they're all perch, but they're all what I call weight building fish. You know, there's no little bits or anything. They go from 2 ounce up to 12 ounce. And if you're catching them like this, just keep putting them in your net and catching them. Just take your time with every fish. We're in a, oh, is it a perch? A minute, what's this? Oh, it's a little skimmer. Oh, skimmers have moved in. Ah, very nice. It's a proper skimmer. What you do get sometimes up here are the hybrid type fish, but that's a proper skimmer, that. One day that'll be bronze or black. It's a bonny little fish, that one. There you go, little skimmer. I've got a few fish, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Something about fishing the positive way and not squat fishing and daft things like that. I like to fish more positive. I feel as though that's what I've achieved today. I've caught some fish on feed. I didn't catch my chub, unfortunately, but I caught some perch and I caught a few early skimmers on the tip. And I came on the pole and there were quite a few fish. There's some nice roach, not as many as I would have liked, but I caught some perch and 1 or 2 skimmers. So in all, I've had a nice day. Caught some fish that you don't normally see in the canal so often, some nice skimmers. But we'll see what weight I've got. I think I've got about 6 or 7 pound. And usually 6 or 7 pound is not enough to get in the money, but we'll see. Here we go. There's a few fish in there. Always, when you're weighing, is just roll them to the top of your net, like so. Give them into the mouth and you take them to the scales. Oh, I'm a bit more than 6 pound there. Oh, but I've £8 there, yeah. Now in that net, as you can see, there's a few roach. There's 1 or 2 skimmers. These skimmers you never see in matches. There's quite a lot of perch in. There's a good spread. There's some of these lovely roach. I mean, they're really bonny fish. But look at these skimmers, that all different sizes as well. They've been there a few years. So I'm happy with that. There's £8 of fish there, and that will definitely get me in the coin. There might be a bit more than £8, but I'm happy with that. We'll put them back now to swim another day. There we go, my little beauties. And there they go. Well, for me, that's the best way to fish. There's different ways of fishing the canal. You can fish it as a team, you can squat fish, you can chop worm fish, you maybe go along pole and catch an eel. I prefer the positive way. I prefer to compete and win a match. And there's only one way to do that, and that's fish positively. Fish the far bank for chub. All right, I didn't catch a chub today, but that's how it goes. I caught some perch, I caught 1 or 2 skimmers. So all right, I had a couple of pound it for an hour and a half. I was quite happy about that. Came on the pole line, there were a few skimmers there, a few roach and a few perch. But I fished it positively. I fished it the way that I would like to win a competition. And I'm happy about that. That's all I want to do. I'm a very competitive person. I want to win. I just wish you all the best and tight lines.